There comes a moment in every person's life when the noise disappears. The people who promised they would always be there become distant. The friends you thought would walk beside you suddenly choose another road. The support you expected never arrives. The applause you were waiting for never comes. And in that quiet moment, you are forced to meet the one person you have been avoiding your entire life. Yourself. Let me tell you something. One of the hardest journeys a human being can ever take is not climbing a mountain, crossing an ocean, or fighting an enemy outside of themselves. The hardest journey is walking alone long enough to rebuild the person inside you. Because when you are alone, there are no distractions, no one to blame, no one to impress, no one to hide behind. Just you, your thoughts, your choices, your wounds, your dreams, and the question that every person must eventually answer, who am I becoming? Think about this for a moment. Many people are afraid of being alone because silence reveals things they have been running from. Silence reveals the habits you need to change. Silence reveals the excuses you have been protecting. Silence reveals the dreams you abandoned because life became uncomfortable. And that is why so many people stay busy. They keep themselves surrounded by noise because noise allows them to avoid transformation. They scroll endlessly. They chase temporary pleasure. They seek constant approval. They fill every empty moment with something external because they are afraid of what they might discover internally. But here's what most people don't understand. Being alone is not always a punishment. Sometimes being alone is preparation. Sometimes life removes people from your path because the version of you that exists today cannot enter the future you are trying to build. Sometimes the door closes because you are meant to stop looking backward. I learned something years ago. A seed does not grow into a tree while remaining comfortable inside the fruit. The seed must separate. It must be buried. It must spend time in darkness. And from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But underneath the surface, something powerful is being created. Roots are forming. Strength is developing. A foundation is being built. And sometimes your lonely season is exactly that. A season where nobody sees the work. Nobody hears the prayers. Nobody understands the sacrifices. Nobody recognizes the person you are becoming. But deep inside, something is changing. You are building roots. You are developing character. You are creating a foundation that cannot be destroyed by the opinions of others. Because here's the truth. A person who depends on constant validation will always be controlled by the world around them. But a person who learns to stand alone develops a different kind of power. They stop asking, do they believe in me? And they start asking, do I believe in myself enough to keep going? There is a huge difference between being lonely and being alone. Loneliness is feeling abandoned. But solitude is choosing growth. Loneliness says, nobody is here for me. Solitude says, this is my opportunity to build myself. The same empty room can break one person and transform another. The same silence can destroy one person's confidence and strengthen another person's purpose. The difference is not the situation. The difference is the mindset. Let me tell you about a person who discovered this lesson. There was someone who spent years building a life around other people's expectations. Every decision was based on approval. Every move was based on what others thought. Every dream was measured by whether people around them accepted it. And for a while, life looked successful from the outside. They had conversations. They had connections. They had people around them. But inside, something felt missing because they were surrounded by people, but disconnected from themselves. Then one day, circumstances changed. A relationship ended. A familiar environment disappeared. People they trusted moved on. Suddenly, the person who had always been surrounded found themselves sitting alone. And the first emotion was fear, because they had never learned how to stand without someone holding them up. They had built their identity on other people's opinions. They had built their confidence on other people's reactions. They had built their happiness on things they could not control. And when those things disappeared, they felt like they disappeared too. But then something unexpected happened. After weeks of discomfort, after months of reflection, after many difficult conversations with themselves, they started discovering something. They discovered they were stronger than they believed. They discovered they had abilities they never developed because they were always trying to fit into someone else's world. They discovered dreams they had buried. They discovered discipline they never practiced. They discovered courage they never knew existed. And the very season they thought was destroying them was actually rebuilding them. Because sometimes life has to remove the unnecessary before it can reveal the essential. Think about this for a moment. A building renovation is not always beautiful. When a building is being rebuilt, there is dust, there is noise, there are broken walls. There are moments when it looks worse before it looks better. But nobody walks past a construction site and says, this building is ruined because there is destruction happening. No. They understand something is being created. So why do we look at our own lives differently? Why do we look at our struggles and assume we are failing? Why do we look at our difficult seasons and believe we are losing? Maybe you are not falling apart. Maybe you are being rebuilt. Maybe the old version of you has to be removed because it cannot carry the future you desire. The person who constantly seeks comfort cannot become the person who creates greatness. The person who avoids challenges cannot develop strength. The person who runs from silence cannot discover wisdom. Growth requires a moment where you choose yourself, not selfishly, not by ignoring others, but by taking responsibility for the person you are becoming, because nobody else can do your inner work. Nobody else can wake up for you. Nobody else can develop your discipline. Nobody else can control your thoughts. Nobody else can decide what kind of person you will become when nobody is watching. And that is where transformation begins. Not when the world notices you. Not when people congratulate you. Not when success finally arrives. Transformation begins when you make a decision in private. A decision that says, I may not have everything I want yet, but I refuse to remain the person I have been. That decision is powerful because every great life is built through small decisions repeated consistently. People often look at successful individuals and only see the result. They see the confidence. They see the achievements. They see the recognition. But they rarely see the lonely mornings, the difficult choices, the moments when that person had to continue without encouragement, the days when nobody was cheering, the nights when nobody knew how hard they were fighting. Success is often created in invisible moments. The world sees the harvest, but it rarely sees the years of planting. Here's what most people don't understand. Your private life is creating your public future. The habits you practice when nobody is watching are shaping the person everyone will eventually see. If you spend your alone time improving yourself, learning, reflecting, building discipline, and developing your character, you are preparing yourself for opportunities you cannot see yet. But if you waste every moment of solitude escaping from yourself, you are delaying your own growth. Your future is not created by one giant moment. It is created by the accumulation of small choices. One page read, one workout completed, one promise kept to yourself, one temptation resisted, one uncomfortable conversation faced, one day where you decided not to quit. The compound effect works in every area of life. Small actions repeated over time create massive results. A person who improves one small thing every day may not look different tomorrow. They may not look different next week. They may not even look different next month. But give that person enough time, give them enough consistency, give them enough commitment, And one day people will ask, what happened to you? And they will not understand that the transformation did not happen overnight. It happened quietly. It happened when nobody was paying attention. It happened during the days when walking away would have been easier. Because rebuilding yourself is not about creating a perfect version of yourself. It is about becoming a stronger version of yourself, a wiser version, a more disciplined version, a version that no longer collapses every time life becomes difficult, because life will test you. There will be moments when your plans fail. There will be moments when people disappoint you. There will be moments when you question your direction. And during those moments, you will discover whether your foundation was built on comfort or character. Anyone can be motivated when everything is going well. Anyone can feel confident when people are supporting them. Anyone can believe in themselves when success is obvious. But the real test comes when nobody is clapping. The real test comes when progress feels invisible. The real test comes when you have to continue simply because you gave yourself a promise. And that promise becomes stronger than your temporary emotions. Because emotions change, motivation comes and goes. But discipline stays. Discipline is the bridge between the person you are and the person you want to become. And many people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline means forcing yourself to live a miserable life. They think discipline means removing all happiness. But discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-respect. It is saying, I respect my future enough to make better choices today. It is saying, I will not sacrifice my tomorrow for a few minutes of comfort today. It is saying, I will build a life I do not need to escape from. And this is where walking alone becomes powerful. Because when you walk alone, you learn to trust your own commitment. You learn that your progress does not need an audience. You learn that your dreams do not need everyone's permission. You learn that sometimes the greatest conversations you will ever have are the ones you have with yourself in silence. And that conversation begins with one important question. Am I becoming the person my future requires me to be? Because the future version of you is waiting, the version who is stronger, the version who is wiser, the version who has overcome battles nobody knew about, the version who looks back at this difficult season and understands why it had to happen. But becoming that person requires something from you. It requires you to stop searching for someone to rescue you. It requires you to stop waiting for the perfect moment. It requires you to stop believing that your life begins when everything becomes easy. Because growth does not happen when life becomes easy. Growth happens when you decide that even when life becomes difficult, you will continue building. You will continue learning. You will continue moving forward. And there is a reason some people become unstoppable after experiencing their hardest seasons. Because those difficult seasons teach them something comfort never could. They teach them how to rely on their own strength. They teach them how to make decisions without needing everyone's approval. They teach them that confidence is not something you receive from other people. Confidence is something you build by keeping promises to yourself. Let me tell you something. Every time you do something you said you were going to do, even when you did not feel like doing it, you send a powerful message to your own mind. You are telling yourself, I can trust me. And that relationship with yourself is one of the most important relationships you will ever build. Because if you cannot trust yourself, every dream becomes heavier. Every challenge becomes more frightening. Every opportunity becomes filled with doubt. But when you begin trusting yourself, something changes. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop waiting for someone to tell you that you are capable. You stop looking around to see if everyone agrees with your vision. You begin walking with a quiet confidence, not arrogance, not ego, a quiet confidence that says, I know what I am building. I know what I am becoming, and I am willing to work for it. Think about this for a moment. A tree that grows in a protected environment may look beautiful, but it has never learned how to survive strong winds. The tree that has faced storms develops deeper roots. The storms do not destroy it. The storms train it. And sometimes the challenges in your life are not there to break you. They are there to force you to develop roots. Because a person without roots can be moved by every opinion, every criticism, every rejection, every failure. One negative comment can destroy their confidence. One setback can make them quit. One closed door can convince them that they were never meant to succeed. But a person with roots understands something different. They understand that rejection is not always a rejection of their worth. Sometimes it is simply redirection. They understand that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of the process of becoming successful. They understand that every person who builds something meaningful has moments where they question themselves. The difference is they continue anyway. Here's what most people don't understand. The strongest people are not people who never experience weakness. The strongest people are people who experience weakness but refuse to surrender to it. They feel fear, but they move. They feel doubt, but they continue. They feel tired, but they remember why they started. Because your emotions are visitors. They come, they stay for a while, and then they leave. But your purpose is the foundation you stand on when emotions are changing. I learned something years ago. You cannot build a remarkable life by constantly negotiating with your feelings. If every morning you ask yourself, do I feel like working today? You will lose many battles because there will always be days when you do not feel motivated. There will always be days when the bed feels more comfortable. There will always be days when quitting feels easier. But successful people understand something. They do not depend on feeling ready. They prepare themselves to move even when they are not ready. That is the difference between a dream and a commitment. A dream is something you desire. A commitment is something you organize your life around. A dream says, I hope this happens. A commitment says, I will become the person who makes this happen. And becoming that person requires rebuilding, not just changing your circumstances. Changing yourself. Because many people want a new life while keeping the same mindset that created their old life. They want new results with old habits. They want success with a lazy routine. They want confidence with a negative inner voice. They want freedom while continuing to make choices that keep them trapped. But life does not work that way. The outside world often reflects the inside world. If your thoughts are chaotic, your actions will be chaotic. If your standards are low, your results will eventually reveal it. If you do not control your attention, someone else will. Your mind is the most powerful tool you own, but a powerful tool without training can become dangerous. A person with an untrained mind becomes controlled by every emotion, every distraction, every temptation. But a person who learns to master their mind begins mastering their life. This is why solitude is so valuable, because solitude gives you a classroom. It gives you a place to examine your thoughts. It gives you a place to ask difficult questions. Questions like, why do I keep repeating the same mistakes? Why do I keep choosing comfort over growth? Why do I care so much about opinions from people who are not building my future? Why am I waiting for permission to become who I was meant to be? These questions are uncomfortable. But uncomfortable questions often create powerful answers. Most people avoid deep questions because deep questions require responsibility. It is easier to blame. It is easier to say, my situation is because of them. My failure is because of circumstances. My lack of progress is because I never had the right opportunity. Sometimes circumstances are difficult. Sometimes life is unfair. Sometimes people face challenges they did not choose. But eventually, every person must reach a point where they ask, what can I do from here? Because that question changes everything. What can I do from here? That question moves your focus from the past to the future, from blame to responsibility, from helplessness to possibility. The past can teach you. The past can shape you. The past can give you wisdom. But the past cannot be where you live. You cannot rebuild yourself while constantly visiting the place that broke you. Some people spend years mentally returning to old pain. They replay old conversations. They remember old disappointments. They keep reopening wounds that were meant to heal. And because they are emotionally living in yesterday, they cannot fully build tomorrow. There comes a moment when you have to say, that happened. It affected me. It taught me something. But it does not control me anymore. That moment is powerful. Because forgiveness is not always about another person. Sometimes forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the weight you have been carrying. Forgiving yourself for the mistakes you made when you did not know better. Forgiving yourself for the time you wasted. Forgiving yourself for the opportunities you missed. Forgiving yourself for the version of you that was still learning, because you cannot hate yourself into becoming better. You can only grow yourself into becoming better. A person who constantly attacks themselves creates more weakness. A person who accepts responsibility while showing themselves compassion creates strength. You are not rebuilding because you hate who you were. You are rebuilding because you respect who you can become. And that is a completely different energy. One comes from shame. The other comes from purpose. Think about a sculptor. A sculptor does not look at a block of stone and see only what it is today. The sculptor sees what it can become. Then, with patience, discipline, and vision, they remove what does not belong. Piece by piece. Day by day, the masterpiece is revealed. Your life is similar. There are things you must remove. Negative habits, limiting beliefs, excuses, fear of judgment, the need to always be understood, the desire to please everyone, because every time you remove something that is holding you back, you create space for something stronger, more discipline, more clarity, more courage, more wisdom, more purpose. And sometimes the hardest part of rebuilding yourself is accepting that the old version of you cannot come with you everywhere. Some habits must be left behind. Some environments must be left behind. Some relationships must change. Not because you think you are better than anyone, but because you finally understand that your future deserves protection. Your energy matters. Your time matters. Your attention matters. Where you place them determines what grows. A farmer understands this principle. A farmer does not plant seeds everywhere randomly. They choose the ground carefully. They prepare the soil. They protect what they plant because they understand something important. Whatever you consistently feed will eventually grow. Feed your mind with negativity, and negativity grows. Feed your mind with learning, and wisdom grows. Feed your mind with excuses, and limitations grow. Feed your mind with discipline, and strength grows. Your life is always being shaped by what you repeatedly give your attention to. And this is why rebuilding yourself requires becoming intentional, because the world is constantly trying to decide what you should think about, but the person who takes control of their attention takes control of their direction. And when you control your direction, you begin creating a life that is not accidental, a life built by choice, a life built by purpose, a life built by someone who finally decided, I will no longer wait for life to change me. I will change myself. Because the moment you accept responsibility for your growth, something inside you awakens. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this trying to teach me? And that question opens a completely different chapter of your journey. There is a difference between a person who goes through difficulty and a person who grows through difficulty. Many people experience pain, but not everyone extracts wisdom from it. Many people